Who did that?
The moon shines red, rainy skies ahead, and her heart beats fled. Woke up in her bed to the moonlight.
Howdy everybody, I am back and welcome to a new video. So I asked you guys on Instagram what type of video you would like to see from me, and the options were a vlog or a video about my OCD, a sit-down video. And the final result, the most chosen option was a video about my OCD. So that is what I'm going to do today, and I did end up giving you guys both because I gave you a vlog in my last video, and a lot of people wanted to see that one too. I talk a lot about eating disorders on this channel, but I do have a lot of experience with having OCD, and I feel like those two go hand in hand a lot of the time. I've really enjoyed letting you guys know more about my experiences lately, and I do love providing educational information, but I've just really enjoyed the videos where I don't really script anything and I kind of just say stuff off the top of my head. I don't know if that's because it's easier. It also feels more natural though. It just feels more like I'm talking to a friend, and I kind of like that dynamic more, so I've been doing it more often. I have been more busy than I have ever been in my life the last 3 months, so that is one of the reasons that you've had hardly any videos, so I apologize about that, but I've just been so stressed. Like, I've had no sense of structure or routine, and I'm not necessarily complaining. I've had a lot of good things going on, but I have had one hell of a time, so sorry for the delay. I always have one reason or another why I'm apologizing for the slow output of videos. I just always have something interfering with me making videos. I don't know if it's the heavens above telling me that I'm not supposed to be doing this or what, but I'm not listening. But anyways, getting into the video, I am just going to be talking to you guys about the history of my OCD, where it started, how it was when I was a kid, how it is now, how I manage it, all of that good stuff. So let's get into it. One thing that I have always done that I now know is OCD is picking at my lips and biting at them. And I don't mean just like biting at my lips, I mean like picking the skin off of my lips with my teeth. That is something that I have done since I was a little kid, and I still do it now, and it actually causes me an extreme amount of anxiety, and I have a really hard time getting myself to stop, and it is very embarrassing. And I now know that it is called trichotillomania, I think. So I actually got that wrong. Trichotillomania is a hair pulling disorder, like your hair and your eyelashes and stuff like that. And what I have is called dermatillomania. And dermatillomania is also called excoriation disorder, I just learned. So the reason I think these fall under the category of OCD is because it is definitely a compulsion, and it's very obsessive. And that's what OCD stands for, is obsessive compulsive disorder. If you didn't know, I'm having such a hard time speaking today. I also forgot to mention the reason that I keep on doing this. The end goal that I'm looking for is for my lips to be smooth. That's the purpose. So it usually starts out with my lips being really dry and cracked, and so I start trying to get the dead skin off of them, and then I get all of the dead skin off of them, but I feel like there's these little spots where it's still there, and so I'll just keep picking at them and biting at them until I feel like they're 100% smooth, which never ends up actually happening because I just ruin my lips in the process. It just goes downhill and they get worse and worse and worse. So I'm never able to achieve what I'm going for, and it's very distressing. So it's a skin picking disorder that actually falls under the category of OCD, and it's called a body focused repetitive behavior. And I have always been very, very embarrassed of it. I don't like people drawing attention to it because sometimes people will notice it and then just be like, Tatum, stop. And it causes me so much more anxiety when people do that because I legitimately cannot get myself to stop. And so all that does is make me aware that other people have noticed it, and then I'm 1,000 times more embarrassed. It's not really just an anxiety behavior anymore. It's kind of just there, and I do it almost every day. And sometimes I can get myself to go a couple of weeks without doing it, which happens very rarely. But for the most part, it's a constant, and I don't even know how to describe how distressing it is. I actually got on OCD medication specifically because of this, because I was staying up all night long, picking at my lips and biting them. And that's something that I've done for years, but it was never as bad as it was until like last year. And I had several nights in a row where I just plain didn't go to sleep, and I was sitting there in my bed picking at my lips and biting at them all night long, never went to bed. And I was sitting there having a panic attack, crying while I was doing it almost every time because I couldn't get myself to stop. And I was so tired, and I wanted to just go to bed, and it's caused me to have several unproductive days as well, which has made me very anxious because I'll get up with a plan for the day, and I won't be able to accomplish any of that stuff because I'll just be sitting there biting at my lips, and then I feel like shit about myself because of that, and that makes me bite at my lips more, and it's just this terrible cycle. It's definitely improved a lot since I got on that medication. It was just really bad for a while there, and I'm very grateful to not have that be as big of a part of my life anymore because it really was consuming my life, and it's still there. Hopefully I can get myself to stop doing it in the future entirely, because it is something that brings me a lot of shame, and I hate shame. As you guys probably know, if you have watched my videos for a while, I think that that is just the worst emotion. Another thing that I did a lot as a kid that was part of my OCD was I would count all of the stairs that I walked down. No matter what staircase it was, I was always counting the stairs, and I counted all of the tiles that I stepped on, and I couldn't step on any of the cracks, and if I missed one I had to go back, or if it didn't feel right I had to go back. And I had no idea that that was even OCD. I literally didn't even know what OCD was at that age. I think that was when I was probably like 6 and on. I actually felt very shameful and secretive of the OCD traits that I had as a kid because I didn't even know what OCD was. I just thought that something was wrong with me. But anyways, counting the stairs and the tiles and stuff like that is not something that I do now. That was just a trait that I had when I was little, and it kind of faded out as I got older. But another one that I had when I was little that I do still have now was I had to have the volume always be at certain numbers, and like when I got candy, like Reese's Pieces or M&Ms or something, it always had to be in certain numbers as well, and mine was uneven, so I had to have like 3s, 5s, 7s, or 10s, not 1s. 1s are just weird, not 1s, and 10 because it's a nice round number. 1s and 9s are trash, and I actually loved 9 when I was little. When I was little, that was my favorite number, and now I hate it because it's just too close to 10, you know? So if I'm with somebody in a car and they're changing the volume, I can't look because I don't want to micromanage things. So the number thing actually goes beyond that just a little bit. If I, for example, am pouring a cup of coffee and I pour it once into the cup, right? Then I would have to pour it in another time for it to be full. But then that would be 2 times, and I want it to be 3. So I would have to pour it in a 3rd time, even if it's just a drop, because then it still counts as 3 in my mind. Am I making sense? I am like sharing all of my most vulnerable stuff, and I know that I seem like I am handling it perfectly well, but it honestly is kind of scary to share this kind of information. But I'm doing it in the hopes that it helps other people, and it makes me feel good to just be open and vocal. But yeah, so stuff like that occurs in my everyday life all day, just random little ritualistic things with numbers, and that aspect of it doesn't really affect my life in a negative way. I'm kind of like accustomed to it at this point. The last thing that I did when I was a kid that I don't do now, luckily, is I would have something, for example, on like one end of my dresser, and if things were going well in my life for a few months, then I would refuse to move that item to anywhere else, another side of my dresser, anywhere else in my room, because I believed, for some reason, that my whole life would fall apart if I moved it, and I just barely learned that that was OCD. So I legitimately just thought that I was crazy for a long time, so I was very glad to find out that these things are things that people actually do. Not that it's great, definitely didn't have a positive effect on my mind, but it was nice to know that I wasn't alone and that there were a lot of other people that thought the same way. That's how I was when I found out that I had an eating disorder too, actually. It was very nice to find out that I was also not alone in a lot of the thoughts that I was having and the behaviors that I was having and everything else. So it's kind of comforting when you find a community like that you fit in with. I actually don't know how I forgot about this part, because this was a really big part of my OCD when I was a kid. I had a lot of OCD when it came to schoolwork, and particularly when I was in junior high, I would end the year with a whole backpack full of papers, a stack of papers like that high of assignments that I never turned in, because either all of the answers weren't 100% right, or if it wasn't perfect, I wouldn't turn it in. And so I ended up failing a lot of my classes, and that is one of the things. I'm specifying that because there were a lot of things that led to this, but that was one of the things that led me to not graduating high school. Finishing up just this little part right here, I just wanted to say that if you guys want a video on how it applies to my eating disorder, just let me know in the comments. I did not add that to this video, even though it does apply to my eating disorder a lot, just because it's already pretty lengthy and I didn't want to prolong the video anymore. So one other thing that I forgot to mention was when I was little, I hoarded things, which again, did not know was part of my OCD until recently. I collected anything and everything. You could not even see the floor in my room because every little thing had a memory attached to it that I refused to throw away. So I just had so many useless items all over the place. And it's kind of reversed now, because in adulthood, actually, I think it started when I was around 17. I became very obsessed with things being clean and organized.
Cleaning, I haven't dusted up here for 2 or 3
hours.
And I know that that's a very stereotypical form of OCD, but that just happens to be how mine works. I get very, very stressed out if my area in my room is dirty or unclean, and I get really nervous when there are people over, because what stresses me out even more than me messing with my own items and not putting them in the right place is other people.
Should I help you clean up? No way. You had your party, now I have mine.
It used to be to the point that if I had a single dish out, I could not go to sleep, because all I would think about was that one dish that was in my room that needed to be in the kitchen.
If it bothers you that much, just go out and get the shoes.
Luckily, I am letting loose with that a little bit. I've been trying really hard to not be so rigid when it comes to stuff like that, to not be so black and white in a lot of areas of my life, and I think part of that is due to the medication that I've been on. It definitely helps me with not thinking as black and white. My room still is always clean and organized though, all the time, because I can't have it any other way, and it's just nice to know where all of my belongings are. And it also is actually very helpful for my ADHD, because I'm not losing stuff all of the time. If I always keep things where they're supposed to be, I don't lose my stuff. So even though it's stressful to feel like everything needs to be super tidy and organized constantly, it does help me never lose stuff. My car was a big thing for me. Like, I was vacuuming and detailing my car every single day in the middle of summer last year when it was so hot, and I just couldn't stand any crumbs or anything being in there. I was going crazy if it got dirty in the slightest, even if there was dust. Like, I just was constantly detailing it, vacuuming it, and it was very time consuming. So I'm not as obsessive about that anymore, which I'm happy about as well. I also, for a while there, felt like I had to physically be really clean, and so I was taking multiple showers a day. I had to wash my hands so many times a day, and that was before I started taking medication as well. My OCD was just getting worse in a lot of areas, and that I think was because of recovery. I felt like this desperate need to control something because I didn't have my eating disorder anymore, and so I focused a lot more on controlling things with my OCD. I also had an extreme fear about food being on my hands for a while, and they actually had to stop me from washing my hands at treatment because I would get up so many times in the middle of a meal just to go wash my hands because I could not stand food being on them. And they eventually realized that it probably wasn't a healthy behavior, so they told me I wasn't allowed to do that anymore. And luckily I don't have that issue anymore, so I'm grateful for that. I really can't even tell you how much medicating myself has done for me. It's definitely helped my mental health a lot. And I was very, very stubborn for a while there about taking medications because I was so heavily medicated in treatment for things that I didn't need to be. And so I just stopped taking psychiatric medication altogether for like a year and a half, and I did not want to start again. And then I eventually realized that I probably needed to be on something and that I was doing myself a disservice by not being on anything. My OCD also shows up a lot in my music. It shows up in my eating disorder too. Those two definitely coincide a lot. But with my music, I've definitely always had a lot of OCD traits because I've always been very, very perfectionistic about it. Even if I heard like the tiniest little flaw in it, I would be very self-deprecating, and I actually hated doing live performances because people would tell me that I did good, and I felt like I didn't deserve the compliment because I heard all of the flaws that they didn't hear. And I would start the day in a really good mood, and then I would hear myself sing and hear myself make little mistakes, and I couldn't handle it. I would just be devastated because it wasn't perfect, and that's something that I'm trying to work on a lot now too. The last thing that I know is definitely part of my OCD, that is probably the second biggest one next to biting at my lips, is making really, really long, detailed checklists of things that I have to do for the day, and they're just completely unrealistic, and I feel like I have to do them all in order. And I was doing that almost every day, and it was very, very stressful for me because I felt like I had to fill my day with 1,000 things or else I wasn't being productive, and I felt very bad about myself. I just had this notion in my head that, I don't know, I wasn't good enough or something if I didn't get all of those very tedious things accomplished. A lot of the things on the lists, I mean, some of them at least were, they did have a point, but a lot of them were tedious and meaningless, but they made me feel something. They made me feel some sense of accomplishment, and I really needed that because for a long time there, I had a really big issue with feeling like I wasn't contributing enough in society, and I still kind of feel that way a little bit, but not to the extent that I did. And I still do make the lists, but they are not nearly as detailed. And I really only put things on there that I want to be doing and that I need to do, and not things that are just purely there to make me feel better about myself, because all I end up doing is making me feel worse about myself. So now I probably only put like 5-6 things max on my lists, and I used to have like 20 to 30 things that I had to do every day, and it was, sometimes I would really get them all done too. And then I would end the day and be completely exhausted. I don't even know how I did that. Hi again, it's future me. I'm just gonna be here for a second this time. But my lists were not just super trivial things. Well, actually this is trivial, but like I would add in things like every step of my skincare routine, stuff like that, just to add bulk to the lists to make me feel accomplished in some sense. I did not include pictures of these types of lists because they just are kind of embarrassing to me, honestly, and I just didn't feel comfortable sharing them. So yeah. I also had a bullet journal for a while, and so I would make these like big art projects in there that took me hours, and then on top of that had to do everything on the lists. So I stopped doing that. So yeah, that's how my OCD shows up for me in my life. And really the only thing that I have done is use medication to manage it. And anything else I've tried just hasn't worked. I have been pretty much powerless to it, no matter how hard I've tried. I think I was better at managing it when I was little, the lip picking part at least. But yeah, now really medication is the only thing that I can do. And I'm not saying that that is the case for everybody or that's what you should do and that's the only way to get rid of your OCD or at least manage it. But for me, that's genuinely been the only answer. I'm assuming it shows up in a lot of other areas of my life that I just don't really pay attention to. And you know what? That's okay, because I don't need to be aware of it all. If you guys would like to leave a comment down below and let me know what your experience has been, how you guys have managed it yourselves, if you have it, and if you feel comfortable doing so, I would really appreciate that, and I'm assuming that other people watching this video probably would too. So feel free to do that, and I will see you guys soon in my next video. I hope that you guys enjoyed this one, and if you have any other video topics that you would like me to make a video about, then just let me know. Yeah, I think that's it. So, bye!
The city makes us feel alive and